Hello, I'm Cameron Stewart, and welcome to part 2 of the 3-part series Train the Trainer Money Matters video for students with autism spectrum disorder. This series combines the financial literacy training of the Student Resources Money Management Center with that of the Kristen Farmer Autism Center.
Now that we have become more aware of what autism spectrum disorders are and the associated behavior of young adults with autism, let's discuss some important tips to help you effectively communicate with young adults with autism. We will also look at how, as a financial educator, you can make your learning environment more inclusive when you are working with young adults with autism.
When working with young adults with autism, it is important to understand that they may demonstrate some social and communication behaviors that may appear to be impolite and socially unacceptable to others.
Some social and communication deficits that will be helpful to take into consideration are lack of eye contact, lack of social or communication reciprocity, stereotyped and repetitive use of idiosyncratic language. With these considerations in mind, using the following suggestions will aid in the communication process. Don't make assumptions. We tend to assume young people know certain things. We might see some things as common sense. It is best not to make any assumptions about what the student knows. It is always important to provide clear steps or instructions. If in doubt, check that the student understands what has been asked of them. Try to avoid using sarcasm, irony, and metaphors. For example, it'll cost you an arm and a leg, or a penny wise but a pound foolish. Sarcasm, irony, and metaphors require abstraction from the literal, and this is normally done according to the circumstances of the dialogue or what the dialogue is referencing, which may go beyond what the student is capable of perceiving. Avoid using other forms of figurative speech. People with ASDs may take things literally, so it is best not to use figurative speech. For example, if you were to say, "You'll be back in a minute," the student may fully expect you to be back in 1 minute. If it takes you longer to return, they can easily become agitated and upset. Be direct. People with ASDs usually prefer direct instructions or questions. For example, the indirect question, "Do you know where the checkbook is at?" should be rephrased as, "Where is the checkbook?" Be precise. When giving instructions or explanations, it is best to be precise and say specifically what is required. For example, instead of saying, "Make sure you pay your bills," attempt to clarify by saying, "Remember to pay your electric bill, pay your rent, and pay your cell phone bill." Check that you have been understood. If you feel that there may be any confusion, always check that the student has understood a comment or instruction. If arrangements are left vague, don't be surprised if things don't get done. For example, instead of saying, "You got rent taken care of, right?" you would say, "Did you make your housing payment on Friday, March 1st?" Write it down. It often helps to back up verbal instructions with written ones. Flowcharts, mind maps, or bullet points may be useful depending on the student's individual preference. Follow the 5-second rule. After asking a question, allow up to 5 seconds for the student to respond. Although this may seem like a long time, it can take some time for young adults with ASDs to process a question and develop a response. If your question still elicits no response, try to rephrase it. Part of the communication process in a meeting is establishing a structure or agenda for the meeting, especially for counseling sessions with a student with ASD. Establishing a structure doesn't mean you must be rigid and inflexible. A structure will help to manage both your expectations and the expectations of the student about what can realistically be covered during the available time. It will also give your meetings a familiarity through routine, which can be reassuring and helpful to the student. A characteristic of ASDs is the way in which a young person's nervous system processes sensory information. Young adults with ASDs may be classified as being oversensitive or undersensitive in the way that they process the 5 senses. With this in mind, it is important to understand the significance of creating an environment that has minimal distractions. In general, the following recommendations should be followed to create an inclusive environment. Lighting. Control the amount of lighting. Some young adults with ASDs are sensitive towards the amount of lighting or the type of lighting. Be flexible in allowing them to sit in a place with minimal light distractions if they are sensitive towards light. Sound. Control the amount of auditory distractions. Are there sounds of fans, beeping noises, HVAC systems, cell phone ringtones, or conversations of other people occurring? Try to limit distractive and loud sounds. Visual. Try to limit the amount of visual distractions in a room, such as light movements, shadows, windows on doors where people walking by outside the room is visible, or any other distractors that may hinder the student's concentration. The key is to keep the room simple and free of visual clutter. Creating an inclusive environment is simple. It's always remembering to treat young adults with ASDs as you would all young people. Remember that when talking or counseling young people with ASDs, you need to be more sensitive and knowledgeable about possible communication and environmental distractors. When counseling or training a young adult with ASDs, ask their parents or guardians for their recommendations and suggestions to ensure you are creating an inclusive and supportive environment. Another consideration financial educators need to take into account is when they are working as a team, in which one team member works with a student one day and another works with a student the next. Maintaining of a consistent routine environment must be a priority. A way of maintaining consistency is to keep track of the changes that you make to the learning environment so that all team members are aware of the changes. Please remember the rights of confidentiality need to be adhered to when working with young adults with any diagnosis. If the student allows, then the communicating of their ASD diagnosis can be shared with other team members. It is important to establish a relationship with young adults with ASDs from the start so that they feel comfortable and confident working with you. Young adults with ASDs find it difficult to cope with change and new situations, so it is important to recognize that your initial meetings could be cause for some anxiety. You can help alleviate this anxiety by learning to communicate more effectively and to make your training or learning environment more inclusive. Part 3 of this series will discuss how you can effectively present the basic tenets of budgeting to young adults with ASDs.